Let's get started.
Recording in
Going over your memory scripture first, Proverbs 10:1.
Proverbs 10:1.
A wise son makes a glad father, but a foolish son is the grief
of his mother.
Proverbs 10:1. That's your memory scripture for this week. I have 2 more days before our test. Okay. All right. So this week we've been talking about Joshua, and now he is the leader of the Hebrews. And the good thing about Joshua being the leader is that finally Joshua is going to lead the people into the promised land. Remember, in order for them to possess the land, they would have to remove all the other nations, all the other people out of the land first. So the Lord, tells Joshua and reminds Joshua that he's going to be with him just like he was with Moses, and that he's going to give Joshua the victory over all of these nations. And so Joshua tells the people, and they also are ready to go and possess the land. So this is great because the people are ready to take what, God wants to bless them with. So the first city I told you they would have to conquer was the city of Jericho. Now, Jericho, what made Jericho kind of difficult was that Jericho had walls around the city. And they knew that it wouldn't have been easy to take this city because of those walls. The walls surrounded the whole city. So Joshua decided to send 2 spies to go into the land to kind of scope out the land, check out the land, see what kind of land it is, and also to inspect the walls to see, what the walls look like. I mean, like what is it like up close? So the 2 spies go inside of the land of Jericho, and inside of the land, they see how thick the walls were. I told you the walls were so thick that there were actually homes that were built inside of the walls. So that's how thick and solid it was. So they run across a woman named Rahab. And when she sees the 2 men, she knew that they were Israelite men from the Israelite camp. She also knew that the men were probably there to check out the land because they probably were going to take over the city. So Rahab calls the 2 men to come to her home where they could stay for the night. But someone else sees the men, and that person goes and tells the king that there are 2 spies from the Israelite camp that have entered into the city. So the king gets his soldiers to go and find the men. And they knew that they were in Rahab's home. But when Rahab hears that the soldiers are coming, instead of giving the men up and telling on them, she decides she's going to hide them. So she puts them on the roof and she covers them and hides them. So when the soldiers come to her home, when the soldiers get to her home, they're like, where are the men? She lies, she does, but she's trying to protect them. She says, oh, I don't know where they are. They left already. They did come here, but they left. Really, she was hiding them. And so she tells the soldiers she doesn't know where they are. Last she saw, they were leaving out of the city. So the soldiers believe her and they leave. And so she protected the spies. And so the spies told Rahab, thank you for protecting us. And she told them, she says, listen, I protected you because everyone has heard about your God. Everyone knows what your God has done, how your God has defeated the Egyptians, how your God has helped you to defeat the Amalekites. Everything. We all heard about the things that your God can do. She was like, and we are all afraid. We are all afraid of your God. And I know that your God is going to give you our city. She says, so since I protected you, could you protect me from being destroyed along with the city? She says, I helped you out, so help me out. And so the spies give her their word that they will protect her and they will keep her safe whenever they come to take over the city. And excuse me, they told her they will protect her and keep her safe whenever they come to take over the city. They tell her, they say, they said, all you have to do is put that red scarlet rope, the red rope outside of your window of your home. And that's how we'll know to protect, not to, come inside your home, not to harm you. I told you, it kind of reminds us of Passover, right? They put the blood on the doorpost. Kind of seem like the same thing. So they give their promise, she helped them. This is how they'll help her. So they go back to the camp and they tell Joshua, everything that they learned about the city. Okay. So that's what we'll pick up today. Now, the thing about the city of Jericho, Joshua, he wanted to conquer the city. He wanted to, do what the Lord wanted them to do. And he trusted God It's just the problem that came for Joshua was, how will we get around these walls, right? If the city sees us coming to attack, they can just lock the gates because they'll see us. We can't do a surprise attack because they'll see us. We can't just like come out of nowhere because they'll see us. The walls protect them. It'll be hard for us to get inside of the city. But, even though Joshua felt like it would have kind of been a little too hard or maybe almost impossible, he knew that God could do anything. He knew that God could give him the plan that he needed to be able to conquer the city. So, Joshua is like, Lord, what do we do? Basically, like, what do we do to conquer this city? It's not going to be an easy thing. And what do we do? So the Lord tells Joshua to tell the people to get prepared, get food ready, because in 3 days they will cross over the Jordan and they were going to go and take the city. They would actually now be able to fully enter into the land. So Joshua called the people and told them, listen to the words of the Lord, and you will know that God is living amongst us. And so Joshua was telling the people, we're about to see God do something. We're about to see God moving. We're about to be proven. It's about to be proven to all of us that God is with us. So they get to the Jordan. That was the first thing they needed to do, was cross over the Jordan. Now, the Jordan is not like just a little river. It's a pretty big river that they all needed to cross over. So the people, though, when they get to the Jordan, they're like, okay, so how are we going to cross this river? Because it's not like it's like easy to just jump over it. It's a river, it's gonna take some time to try to cross this. And how do we go, how do we do this with no boat? How are we all, remember, they're not like 100, 200, 300, not even like 5,000 people. They're like 1 million people. And so they're like, okay, so we have to cross over the Jordan, but they're like, how? But like I told you, the children are different from their parents, right? Because what would the parents have done? Complain, right? Probably would have complained like, oh man, how are we going to do this? Oh, we're going to die here. What are we going to do? But the children, which they're now adults, the people who are under Joshua, they listen to Joshua and they're like, we're trusting God just like you, Joshua. We don't know just as much as, we don't know what to do. So we're trusting God as well, Joshua. So the order went through the camp that everyone was to watch the priests. Remember, I told you the priests would carry like the tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant, all of that. They said, when you see the priests carrying this, follow them. However, stay behind them because you've never been this way before. So Joshua tells the people, he says, okay, we're going to cross the Jordan, but we're going to let the priests go first. The priests were going to carry, which was called the Ark of the Covenant. It represented the presence of God with the people, basically. So they are carrying the ark and they were going to cross first and everybody will follow behind the priests. They're like, okay, what's going to happen? We follow behind the priests. Okay. So as soon as the priests step in the water, guess what starts to happen? The water stops flowing and it starts to like make a path, kind of like whenever God split the Red Sea, kind of the same thing, right? And so like as soon as the priests step into the Jordan, as soon as they step into the water, God does it again, basically, right? So the water stops flowing and then it kind of makes a path for them to cross over. So look at this. They are able to see this miracle again. Now, if they were alive at the time, because some of them might have been born after that happened the first time, but some of them remember when they were children, when they saw their parents crossing the Red Sea, and how look at it's happening again. So as they see the priests, as the priests are walking across, the water is drying, the sea is splitting, and all the people, they look, and Joshua's like, let's go. So the people all start to follow behind the priests crossing over. It wasn't just the people, but remember, they have like all their belongings, their animals, all of that. Everybody starts to cross. So if God is about to do this again for them, don't you think he can give them the city of Jericho? These walls are nothing for the Lord. He's able to split a sea. So of course, This is nothing for the Lord at all. So this is nothing for the Lord. He is going to give them, if he gave them this ability to cross over the sea, I'm sure he can give them the city of Jericho. And so now remember, Jericho has walls. So I'm sure they maybe saw at the top of the wall. Remember, because some of them sit at the top of the wall to watch, to keep watch of the city. And I'm sure they probably saw that happen. And they're like, whoa, what is going on? They were like, we've never seen nothing like this before. So all of the Israelites, the Hebrews, they take their time crossing the Jordan River. And now once they cross the Jordan, they are now into the promised land, the land that they have been waiting to go inside of for so long. They have now crossed over in the land. And now it's not over. The next plan is to take their first city, which is the city of Jericho. So the priests come carrying the ark, and they all rejoiced, and they were grateful to God that he did this miracle. He allowed them to cross the Jordan. They didn't have to go all the way around. They didn't have to try to build boats. None of that. They were able to cross the Jordan into the promised land. So to make sure they would never forget this that happened, God told Joshua to have 12 men, one from each of the 12 tribes, to take a rock out of the middle of the river and to pile it as stones. And so they made like a little memorial to kind of remember. So when you would see the rocks, you will remember, oh, this is where God crossed. This is where the Lord split the Jordan for the people to cross over. So the Lord, wanted them to make this memorial so that they would remember the miracle that he performed for them here at, here at the Jordan River. Okay. So now it's go time. Now they're in the land. And now that means it's time for them to take back all of their land. So they would have to remove all these other nations out of the land so that they could take their land as their own. Okay. So, so they finally get into Jordan, but they don't attack Jericho right away. They kind of, wait a minute, because they still kind of need a plan to figure out what to do. So towards the evening, Joshua leaves the people to go by himself, maybe to pray and to kind of see, like, okay, what do we do? Okay, we crossed over the Jordan. We're here now. What do we do? Okay, he knew that it would be difficult to take the city of Jericho. He knew that, but God had promised him that he would be with him. And so Joshua is holding on to that promise that God is going to be with him no matter what, even in something that seems like extremely impossible or way too hard, the Lord would still be with a Joshua. So Joshua is alone, and then suddenly he lifts his head and someone is standing there with a sword in his hand. And Joshua was about to grab his sword, and he's like, who are you? Are you a friend or an enemy? Who are you? Are you on our side or are you on the side of the enemy? And the person said, neither. I am the captain of the Lord's army. The captain of the Lord's army, thought Joshua. But then he realized, he said, wait, this is not a man. This is not just a regular person, but this is who? The Lord himself. This is the Lord, the captain of the Lord's army. This is the Lord. And so Joshua's like, wow. And when he realizes who it is, he bows himself before the Lord. So when Joshua's saying, whose side are you on? The Lord is like, I'm on neither side. I am on the Lord's side. I am the captain of the Lord's army. So I'm not with, this army. I'm not with that army. I'm a part of neither of these armies. I am from the Lord's, or I am the Lord. I am the captain of the Lord's army. So whenever Joshua bows, the Lord says, take off your shoes. This is holy ground. Same thing the Lord told Moses at the burning bush. So this might be Joshua's moment, like it was Moses. You remember Moses? That's when the Lord spoke to Moses at the burning bush. Maybe Joshua's moment too. And so the captain of the Lord's army told Joshua that Jericho was as good as captured and that they would have the victory. He says, I will be in the battle and do all that I command. So he said, this is the battle plan. So Joshua is finally getting the battle plan on how to defeat the city of Jericho. He says, take your army, Joshua, and march around the city for 6 days. Okay? So he says, Joshua, take your army. You're going to march around the city, just around the city. Don't go in the city. Don't touch anything in the city. Nothing. Just march around the whole city, the walls of Jericho for 6 days. You will have a procession, okay? That will have the armed men leading the way. The armed men, meaning the soldiers, would go first. Then we would have the priests blowing the trumpet from the ram's horn following behind. Okay? He says, and as they walk around the city, they cannot say a word. No one can speak. No one can say anything. Just march around the city. He says, so you'll have the soldiers, then you'll have the priests blowing the trumpets. He says, and then you'll have 4 priests carrying the ark, that same ark that they had to cross the Jordan. He says, you'll have priests carrying that as well. That was the instructions. He said, that's all I want you to do. He says, for 6 days, march around the city. For 6 days, don't say a word while you march. The soldiers first, the priest blowing the trumpet, and then we'll have the Ark of the Covenant. Just march around the city, go back. That's all you have to do. Okay? So I'm sure Joshua's like, that's weird, right? We need to conquer the city. This is not conquering the city, right? This is just a, but if Joshua knows the Lord, he knows to do exactly what God says. Okay? He says, then on this, and then there'll be most soldiers at the end. I'm sorry. It's like soldiers, priests, Ark of the Covenant, more soldiers. Okay, that's the whole group, how they would march around the city. He says, so march for the 6 days, but on the 7th day, something different. He says, the group of people, the procession that's marching, he says they'll march 7 times on the 6th day, on the 7th day. Okay, so on the first 6 days, they will march only 1 time, but on the 7th day, they would march 7 times around the city. After they march the 7 times, the priests are going to blow the trumpet one last long blow, and then the men will shout, and the walls are just going to come tumbling down. That's it. He says, y'all don't have to touch anything. Y'all don't have to do anything. He says, all you have to do is follow my instructions, first of all. And on the last day, after you march the 7 times, shout, blow the trumpet, and the walls will just fall down. That's it. They just gonna fall down. Yeah, that sounds kind of impossible, right? Nobody's blowing up the wall. They're not like, hitting the wall, nothing. They're gonna shout and march. And that's it. That's it. Now, if you think the Lord is giving this plan, do you think it's possible?
Yes.
Or is it a little bit impossible?
It's possible.
It sounds impossible, but when it's coming from God, that means it's possible, right? So this is different. And Joshua was like, okay, because Joshua thought the Lord was going to tell them, okay, so this is how you're going to do. Y'all going to climb the wall. No, instead the Lord tells them just march. They don't have to do anything but march and shout and blow the trumpet. That's it. So Joshua was like, okay, this is different. This is really different, but, we're going to do it. So Joshua goes and tells his soldiers and the priests what they're going to do. And I'm sure they all were like, okay, that's different. We thought we were going to go in for battle, but if that's not what the Lord wants us to do to get the city, then we're not going to do that. So this is what Joshua tells them that they need to do. He tells them the battle plan, how they will conquer the city. So Joshua tells them, let's get started. He says, so starting tomorrow, we will start to march around the city. We have to march 1 time for 6 days. Then the 7th day is when it will be a little different. So they get together. So they have the soldiers get ready. So they have a group of soldiers. Then you have the priests, Ark of the Covenant. Then you have more soldiers on the end. So they get ready the first day. And I'm sure the people in Jericho, those who would sit on the wall, they probably were watching and they seen them coming and they're like, what are they doing? But then they start marching around the city. And they're like, wait, why are they doing that? So the first day comes and they do that. They just go to the wall. They go around and they march around 1 time. And then they just go back to the camp. Second day comes, they do the same thing because they're doing what the Lord says. They go, march around the city. And guess what? Go back to the camp. And I'm sure the people in Jericho are like, what are they doing? Why are they marching around the city like that? That's weird. Why are they doing that? Then the 3rd day comes, guess what they do? March around the city 1 time, and then they go back to the camp. So 3 days. They do. How many days do they have to do this? 6 days. So 4th day comes, they do the same thing. And I'm sure the people of Jericho are now like, okay, it's been 4 days. Why are they just marching around the city like this? What are they doing? 5th day comes, they do the same thing. March around the city, and they go back to camp. They're just doing what the Lord said. 6th day comes, they go and they march around the city. They do exactly what they had to do. Then they go back to the camp. And so every day they went and they marched. And Joshua told them, and remember, the Lord told them they had to stay silent the whole time, right? Until he would have told them to shout. And they did exactly that, exactly what the Lord told them to do. They did that. For 6 days, they went and marched around the city. One time, they went back to the camp. They didn't do anything. They just did what they were supposed to do. Okay? So that's what they did for the 6 days. And so, of course, I told you the 7th day would be different. That's when the Lord told them that there will be something different. Okay? So this time, the 7th day comes, and Joshua tells them that this time it will be different. He says, we are now going to conquer and get our city. He says, we're going to march around the city of Jericho 7 times today. He says, and when I yell for you to shout, you shout. And we will see the victory. We will have the victory. We will see the walls come down. Now, Joshua told them, though, he says, listen, though, when we go inside the city of Jericho, we go in and everything that we find, because you see, when you would conquer a city, you would take basically everything that they had, right? Because you defeated the city. So they would take all their belongings, all the people's stuff, everything, because they conquered the city. That's how they won. They're taking the victory. But the problem with this is Joshua told them, he says, listen, he says, when we go inside of the city, he says, you don't take anything for yourself. Everything that you find in the city will belong to the Lord, because this is our first victory. We want to give all the first fruits of this victory to the Lord. He says, so we will go in and conquer the city, but everything that you find in there, any gold, any silver, anything, bring it. We're going to give it to the Lord. Now, this is important, and we'll get into this next week, but remember this. The Lord is commanding them not to take anything for themselves when they go inside of the city of Jericho. Everything that they find, when they start to take over the city, they bring it and give it to who? The Lord. It's for the Lord. Not that God was going to take everything every time. It's just God wanted the first fruits, right? Okay. So the 7th day comes. Joshua tells them, get ready. So they go out. They go out to the city of Jericho. They start their first march. And so the people of Jericho are like, watch, they're going to go back to the camp. But after they marched the first time, they marched a second time. And they're like, oh, it's different today. Then they march a third time. Then they march a fourth time. And they're like, okay, what are they doing? Why are they marching more times today? Then they march the 5th time. Then they march the 6th time. Then they complete their last march the 7th time. And Joshua shouts for them to shout. So whenever all the men shout, the priests blow the trumpet, something starts to happen. The walls start to kind of shake. You feel the ground shaking, the ground moving. And I'm sure those that were standing on the wall were like, what is going on? What is going on? You hear like it sounded like it felt like an earthquake hit the city. And then all of a sudden, by the power of God, guess what happens? The walls come down. The wall, like down, not like there was a crack in the wall, it split. No, the walls fell flat. They came completely down. Completely down. And I'm sure everybody, they were probably, even the Israelites were probably like, wow, this is amazing. Because, yeah, they were doing what God said. But I'm sure when it happened, they were like, wow, the Lord really did this. And so there was only one small part of the wall that remained. And guess whose house was on that part? Rahab. Remember the lady who helped them? Yeah. That was only her part. Her part of the wall was still there. So the Lord protected Rahab, because she protected God's people. She helped them out. And so as the Israelites stood around the city, Joshua commanded the men, go in the city, because now it's battle time. Now we are going to go and take everything that we find. And so, of course, they find Rahab's home. They don't do Rahab anything, because the promise was that if she had the red scarlet rope, which she did, outside of her window, they would keep her safe, her and her family. So Rahab with her family, they said, don't be afraid. We'll be all right. You'll be all right. And so they take Rahab and her family, and they were saved. So she did what she was supposed to do. If she didn't put that red cord out, maybe it wouldn't have went like that, but because she followed the instructions and she put the red cord outside of her door, she was saved from the destruction of her city. So they go in the city and they go and they conquer the city of Jericho, a city that had walls around it. That's probably going to be one of their hardest cities to defeat because it had walls, and that was impossible to kind of figure out a plan, but God gave them the plan and the victory. And look at that. And they didn't even have to do anything, right? They really did. And all they did was march and shout, right? I mean, as far as they didn't have to like go and fight or anything. They literally just had to shout, march, and look at how the walls came down. So now they have defeated their very first city, or city of Jericho. So do you think they're excited?
Yes.
Oh yeah. And so they find a lot of stuff in the city, a lot of gold, a lot of silver, but they can't keep it for themselves, right?
Yep.
No, they have to go and give it to the Lord. So we'll get into that next week, talking about why that's important that they give to the Lord first. Okay. So the walls of Jericho come tumbling down. Joshua tells the men to go in and take the city, and they did. And now they have victory over their first city. So the Lord was with his people. And so they were rejoicing. They were like, yay, we have our first city. And so they see the power of God at work. They see how God, if they trust him, all the things that they can do. Look at that. They knocked down walls with a shout. They just shouted and walls came tumbling down. Yep. Okay. So that's our lesson today on the city of Jericho being conquered. Rahab was saved. They kept the promise with Rahab and she was safe. She was saved from the destruction of her city. The Hebrews have conquered their very first city, which is the city of Jericho. Also, they crossed the Jordan. They saw God dry up the Jordan River for them, and they are now inside of the city. Amen. All right. So that's our lessons this week, guys. Just kind of going into Joshua and their first victory over their first city. And we will, next week, we'll continue talking about how they are going to continue on, because this is just one city. They have a lot of other cities that they have to conquer, okay? All right, guys. So that's our Bible lesson on today. I'll see everybody a little bit later on today. I hope y'all have a good rest of your morning. Okay, bye-bye.